Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for this really interesting interview. And I think you're really going to love this one. Let me ask a question, though. Have you ever wondered if the bond that you share with your pet truly ends when they pass? Today, we're joined with an animal communicator and a pet bereavement specialist who helps grieving pet owners find healing, recognize the signs their pets may be sending from spirit, and discover that love continues beyond this lifetime. I'd like you to welcome Victoria Smith Gillard to the show. Hi, Victoria.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm truly excited about this. I love pet communicators, but you take it one step further and you help the pets and you also help the owners and with that bereavement, because when we lose a pet, they're part of the family.
Yes.
And that part, you know that there's something missing. Number one, you can't feel their energy anymore. Their energy is not in the house anymore or around you. And I've noticed that if my dog, I had this happen one time. I had gone into a different room, shut the door, came back out. I'm sitting there and I'm like, something's different. And I'm calling for her and she's not coming. I'm like, where is she? Well, I had locked her in that room and I
Ah,
didn't know it because she's a small dog. So she just, walked in behind me and I shut the door before she could get out. And I'm like, oh my God, where's her energy? Where is she? Where is she? So I know that that feeling of not having that pet in the physical, it's kind of like the same with not having the person in the physical. But those of us who know that, death is not death,
yeah.
because we can feel that pet around us. And some of us can, some of us think that, death is death. But I have a question for you with that. You help people recognize signs from pets in spirit. What are some of the most common ways that our pets let us know that they're still with us?
So it's there was probably three distinct ways. So I call it visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, which are very kind of clinical words. But so visual just being that we will see them. And this can be things like we'll see them in our peripheral vision. So there was one time when my tabby Phoebe, I had no cats in the house at all. She'd actually been passed for quite a few years. And I came out of my bathroom and I was just walking and then kind of like, oh, no, I'm going to trip over the cat. And then carried on walking and then kind of went, hang on a minute, I don't have a cat. So it'll be things like that where you are seeing them, you're seeing their spirit. So that's one of the instances. When Puss passed away, which was March last year, I was obviously, as you would be, I was absolutely devastated. And 3 days after, I was having kind of like anxiety attacks during the night. And my way to deal with that with bereavement is basically to get up, go outside, put the cold air on my face, and then kind of let everything rest and then come back in. And that's basically what I'd done. I'd come back in, shut the front door, shut the living room door and then start to walk back towards my bedroom. And something in me just went, hang on a minute, did I shut the front door? So I just turned around briefly and was like, yes, I did. And then as I turned back again, I saw her sitting on the dining table in all her glory. And of course, then you look back again, and of course, she's gone. So it's very easy for people to think like they're absolutely crazy, it's my grief, it's this, it's that. But it's not. They are showing you signs. So that's one of the ways. With Panda, for instance, he was a black and white cat as well. I would see him wandering up and down the hallway, even with my boss's cat. So it doesn't even just have to be your own pets. I used to look after my boss's cats. He was Australian. They used to go off to Australia for a certain amount of weeks per year, and I used to look after their babies. And one of the times I went, Emma was in her little room, and I was kneeling down and I was talking to her because she was the only one left out of three at that point. And suddenly I could feel her brother Shadow doing a figure eight next to me. And I just looked at her and went, "Oh, sweetheart, your brother's here. How amazing is that?" And she literally looked where I could feel him. And I was like, "Oh my God, you can see him as well." Because I hadn't looked there. So it's not like I was influencing her or leading her. She actually looked and stared. And I was like, "Oh my God, you can see him. You can feel him." So vision, seeing them visually is quite a big one. They don't always show themselves. Um, they don't suddenly just like appear in front of you. Often it is peripheral vision or like I had, where it's like you turn around and they're there. The other one is auditory, so you might hear them, for instance. So I've had people where they've perhaps heard their horse whinny or they have heard their dog's claws on the laminate. It's those kind of things. You might hear them barking, you might even hear them breathing or snoring, something along those lines. And it'll be something that you can't explain because you'll just be like, there's nothing in here that could make that noise, not an air conditioner, not a radio, nothing. So auditory again is another one. Kinesthetic, that's feelings. So I can kind of put that down to two ways. So like when I felt Shadow, I kind of see that as slightly kinesthetic as well. It was like I could feel him doing that figure of eight next to me. It's not truly a kinesthetic thing, it's more like a knowing, but it does have an element of that to it, of the kinesthetic. But it might be things like I've had clients where they've said I could literally feel them on the bed,
Uh,
like the weight changed on the bed. I had
yeah.
that literally about a week ago, where I was laying on my back, the duvet was already rested, and the duvet went physically down. And it wasn't up, it wasn't that, the feathers were settling, nothing like that in the duvet. This was her, this was Puss, come in, and I said thank you to her. And sometimes people will feel goosebumps when they're close. So when Puss is close, I know she's close tonight. She likes to draw close for interviews and podcasts, which I think is lovely. She's one of my spirit guides, bless her. Probably need it, to be honest. But sometimes when pets are close, you'll feel it because you'll get goosebumps lower down. Whereas when a loved one draws close, often you feel it right down the side of your body. But often with animals, I kind of find it's kind of the knee downwards that you'll often feel it. So they're probably, the three biggest ways that I think people tend to experience them from spirit. So yeah, so lots of different ways, but visual is probably the main one, I reckon.
Yeah, visual and definitely peripheral.
Mm.
That's where I see mainly spirits and also animals. I don't see as many animals as I do see spirits. So you definitely look at it and you feel a difference. I call it energy. You feel that there's something else in the room with you. And one other uh, experience that I had was in dreams. So
Yes.
I saw my dog running and she looked like she was, a dog Superman. She was like this, like, hey, I'm okay. And then off she goes. So when we have these things, that's one of the things that a lot of people express. It's like, I'm just seeing things, or I'm crazy, or I'm just dreaming it because, I miss my animal. No, it's like your spirit guides. So, and I'm here, I'm here.
Yeah.
And they stay with us. But a question for you is, do they stay with us for a certain amount of time, like people do, like spirits do, or are they always there? Because people can stay with us, those who have passed on, until they feel that we're okay, and then they go and do their thing. Is it the same with animals?
So I think it probably depends on the pet and the owner's relationship, to be honest. I mean, I know for me that, Puss is, as I say, one of my spirit guides. Puss, Phoebe, I know that they're both the same soul. So they, they are the same soul. She is my spirit guide. Um, and she is constantly with me. I know at some point that she is going to reincarnate. She's already shown me that.
Ah,
She's already told somebody the day after she passed that she would do. So, and I already said to her anyway, you are part of my soul tribe. We have been together in other lives. You were my previous cat, Phoebe. So I know that if that situation is there, then we will meet again. Um, so I know she is. Um, and I know obviously Phoebe was in a similar guise. But I think, I suppose, as I say, I think it depends on the pet owner relationship, how close they were, how that person is doing. But I think, that their spirit is within the spirit world. The spirit world is all around us. So in essence, for me, I'm kind of like, they are there. It's a bit like having a friend that you don't always see all of the time, but sometimes you might just want a bit of a catch up with them and you ring them and you connect with them. And so we can still do that. We can still connect with our pets in spirit. It might not necessarily be that they're around us all the time if we don't need them to be. But I do still think that we can actually connect with them and still, still be with them. But I certainly think that, in the days after they pass, they know that obviously we're upset. So they do actually draw very close to us. They do want to show us that they are okay, that, they are still around us. But, as you said, we still have to grieve. We still have to grieve that physical loss, that we can't pick them up, we can't cuddle them, we can't feel their fur, we can't feel their purr, or, chuck a ball for them or whatever it is. We're not able to do that. It's a different relationship when they pass to spirit, and we have to grieve that physical loss. Um, but I do think that they do stay with us, yes, but they don't in the beginning, I feel like they are more intensely close with us because of
mhm.
obviously our grief and how we're feeling. But I also think there is a point in time where they feel that actually we're doing okay. So they won't maybe send us as many signs. They won't need to be, connecting with us as much, but it doesn't mean that they aren't there. The same as your friend might not connect with you,
Okay.
every week, but they're still there. That's how I see it.
You had mentioned when we were talking before about reincarnating. So our pets, and I had done this with the dog I have right now. She's a little terrier. Well, before I had a big Doberman, and I said, I seen this dog, and I'm like, just, I think this is my Doberman. And I said, if she does this one thing, then I'll know. And my Doberman used to sleep on the bed with me all the time, but he'd sleep in between my legs. And talk about feeling secure. Okay. No one's going to come in and no, no. And the first time that I had her, guess where she went? And I went, I know that is my Doberman in this really small form. Has the same personality and everything. So people can look at, like when they lose a pet, sometimes they can look at a pet that was sent by their pet to be with them. But then there are other times where it's that same pet, but in a different form, a different body, whether it's they may be a dog now or, whatever. I think that's just fascinating because it's almost like it parallels, of course, people, because people can reincarnate and come back. A baby's going to be born. Hey, that's me. I'm coming back like that, coming back into the family, and I'm going to be able to do things differently. However, that person is coming back. It Everything mimics each other. It doesn't matter if it's a pet or a person. We all get the same thing, like we get the chills, if a
Yeah.
person is around. And versus a ghost, people, there's a difference between a haunting and somebody coming in and saying, hey, I'm here. So it's what I'm getting at is it is the same, the similar, but different, but it's real. And that is one of the things that I want to express, because people listening may be thinking, oh, no, this is no, uh-uh. Now, that doesn't mean that this is this pet, um, but we're in essence giving them permission to say, yes, you're not crazy. How many of us have been called crazy? Okay. You said you have, I
Yeah.
have. And most of the time I've been called crazy to myself. Nobody has to say it. I'm just like, I'm nuts. Okay. Until you start to trust yourself and know, like you said, the spirit world is right here. It's right
Mm.
next to us. It's not out there somewhere until you actually know that, yeah, you're not by yourself. We have people, if we could see what our pets see, you ever notice that?
Oh
They're
yeah. Yeah.
looking or they start growling
Yeah.
at something we can't see. They're teaching us there's something there. They're not just protecting us, but they're teaching us and
Yeah.
saying you need to look or feel that there may be some type of danger or there's, someone good around. So all of our pets, like you had said, they mirror us.
Yeah.
And when we were talking before, you were talking too, they can take on our ailments. And when they do that, are they taking it away from us or are they mimicking our ailment?
So I feel it can be either or. So like I know with Percy, as I say, she suffered from spinal stenosis. And I could definitely feel at the bottom of my spine that there was pain. And I was kind of like, is she taking something from me or am I taking something from her? And sometimes that's quite hard to distinguish in some respects. Um, but I do know that since she's passed, I don't have that symptom.
Hmm.
So that makes me feel in that instance, I was actually picking up on her. I had a very strong, close bond with her. So it would make sense that I would be feeling how she was feeling. Um, Certainly when I had Bagheera, he was a 1 year old black stray, and I had him for just a few weeks. And I'd been doing some Donna Eden energy work before he came in. I was doing her daily energy routine and was feeling like really good. And then when he came in, I noticed how my energy changed because of obviously him coming into the mix and his energy. So I definitely know that we can pick up on their energy, but not necessarily take it, but we can feel it. A bit like sometimes we can feel when one of our friends isn't quite right, and we're just like, oh, what's going on with you? I can feel something's not right in you. But there are other times when they can take it. And like the story I was sharing earlier, I had a client come to me for herself. And she said to me, I know you work with animals. Could I ask you something? And I said, yeah, of course. And she said, I had a dog. He was a therapy dog. And I think he took the person's illness. And I said, right, okay, well, talk to me about that. So I said, tell me a little bit more about that. And she said he was seeing a young girl and she had stomach cancer. And I said, right, okay, bless her. And I said, what did your dog pass from? And she said, stomach cancer. And even now, I'm getting the chills, I'm getting goosebumps, and I do every time I tell that story. And I said to her, well, that's all I can say to you is, I'm getting goosebumps. Goosebumps normally equals truth. Are you getting goosebumps? And she actually said she was.
Hmm.
And so I said, right, okay, so you've got your own confirmation of that. And she said, but I didn't want him to do that. And I said to her, I said, well, what you've got to remember is that he may have had a soul contract with that little girl that actually, if, at the point she gets that condition, he comes into her life and he takes that energy on a metaphysical level. That's kind of how I see it. Everything is energy. He's taking that energy because actually, how do we know what that little girl was going to go on to do in this world? How do we know that she's not going to be the next, prime minister, eco warrior, somebody that comes up with this amazing, patented idea that can help the world in some way? And I said, that's what pets offer us is unconditional love. For us saying, we don't want them to do it, that's more about attachment. We don't want them to leave. We don't want them to
Right.
go.
Right.
And I said, so under that sole contract, they may well have chosen to do that. And it's not the only one I've had. I have had two or three after that, which are a similar situation, where they've taken something. And even my own cat Phoebe, when she was in her last week, that was what started this off. Was in her last week, she had a UTI. And at the same point, I realized that I had mild symptoms of a UTI. And I sort of sat, I was just like, that's a bit weird. And then I started thinking back and I was thinking, do you know what? The last time you did, I did. And that was my first moment of no way. Like, surely she can't do this. She can take it. Um, and of course, once you've got that thought in your head, spirit being spirit's like, okay, so we're going to bring you in some more examples to show you. And even with Puss, so I'd had an argument with somebody. It wasn't a very pleasant argument. They were very narcissistic, very dismissive. And I came away from that argument feeling pretty angry and pretty naffed off, to say the least, without me swearing. And the next day, she got diagnosed with pancreatitis. And when I looked in my metaphysical book, I've got the Metaphysical Anatomy by Yvette Rose. When I looked in that book, when I looked up pancreatitis, it was like, there's the argument. That's exactly how I felt. And I felt really bad because I thought, and I'd said to her, I said, please, please do not take things from me because I can deal with it better in me than I can in you. I can have, different herbs or, I work a lot with like, just normal kitchen herbs and stuff like that. I said I could do that with me. I can't always do that with you. So I kept saying to her, please don't do that. But it wouldn't surprise me in the least if she didn't carry on. But again, that was probably part of her soul contract. It's not the only pet that I've known to do that. Pets have been told by someone else around me, look, if you continue to take this energy, this is not going to end well. But they were like, that's my role. So yeah, that is how I see it, that I've had a lot of examples of that come in. As I say, it's too coincidental that, the day after the argument, she's diagnosed with pancreatitis, and you look
Hmm.
it up and go, wow, okay, well, yep, they all of those emotions were there. So yeah, really do feel that there's an element of that, and it's something that I do sometimes bring into my work. If somebody says to me, oh, my dog's got a bad left shoulder, and I'll be like, okay, what's your left shoulder like? And I am using a genuine example here, and the lady said, "Oh no, my left shoulder's fine. It's my right shoulder that's bad. The doctor did say it's referred from my left, but it's my right shoulder." And I'm sitting there like, "There we go."
Yes.
So it can happen. It can happen, people.
That reminds me of one time I had broken my right ankle, and I always take my dog for a walk, always. Not for like the first 2 weeks, but I decided I'm going to get out and I'm going to, take her for a walk. Do you know that she walked like I did? She took a step. She was, like literally like limping like I
Limping.
was. And I've seen this on YouTube or something where, there's an old man and he's walking very slow and the dog's, mimicking that person. But I feel what they're being very empathetic, and they're, keeping up with us like that. I really didn't notice it until someone said, she's limping like you are. And I thought, oh, well, maybe she's doing that to keep up with me, or she is, very empathetic and
Mhm.
she feels it. But you had said one thing before we go, I want to ask you about this, and I never thought about it. Soul contracts. Animals have soul contracts.
Mhm.
I never thought about that. So I know that people do, we travel in, a soul group, and we come across people in our lives, whether it's for a short time or a long time, because we do have that contract with them. But I never thought about animals. having soul contracts also. So are you
Yeah.
saying that the animals that are in our lives are there because they've contracted with us before they entered Earth and we entered Earth? Okay.
Quite often, yeah, I mean, quite often that can be the case. I can only go by, my own experiences, everything I've read. So there's two books that I want to bring in here, that are, what's coming into my mind. So Robert Schwartz, wrote a book called The Soul's Gift, and that's where I started to learn about soul contracts, soul tribes, and he's got a chapter on pets in there where they can do things like they can reincarnate fully as a soul into another body, but also sometimes they can do walk-ins as well. So you can have elements of a certain pet kind of come in as well, aspects of that soul, and they might stay for a certain period of time while the other soul kind of steps out, and then they swap back again. So it does get a bit complicated. So that can kind of happen. The other one that we want to bring in is Madeline Walker, Pets and Their Past Lives and How They Come to Heal Us. And I read her book in about 3 days quite early on in my journey. And that was all about us having spent past lives together, and how sometimes experiences, negative or traumatic experiences we've gone through in a past life, we then come into this life to then try and heal that, if we haven't healed it fully. And I certainly have had that. One that springs to mind is a dog that was really struggling to get into the car. And when I'd done a communication with him, and I said, okay, I want to ask you about the first journey you had from the breeder to your mum. And straight away he went, that wasn't my first journey. And suddenly, just the way he said it, I just was like, okay, you need to tell me more about that. This is to do with a past life. And he said, yes. And in the past life, what had happened is the owner in that past life was in a car. The dog had still been a dog in that life, the soul. And they were barking and barking. The car went over a cliff and the owner passed away. And he basically had held on to all of that guilt. So, of course, he didn't want to get in the car because he was worried that that might happen again. I then did a very wacky thing in some respects. So I contacted the soul that was his owner in the past life, because I was like, well, there's no limits, surely. If we set the intention, then we can do this. And we did. And I asked that person, that soul, what happened. They showed me the brakes failing, that it was nothing to do with the dog barking. So I then actually relayed that to the dog so that they could actually just release that guilt, because it's like you're carrying something that's not yours. It wasn't your fault. This was a mechanical failure with a car. So that can happen. So yes, I think we do have soul contracts. They do come back into our lives. Good example being my first cat, Phoebe. I'd had her since she could fit in the palm of my hand. When she passed, so that was 2016. I got Puss in 2020. Puss was 4. So if you think about those dates, 2016, 2020, 4 years apart, Puss is 4 years old. She exhibited a lot of the traits of Phoebe. I kept calling her Phoebe before I'd even met her when I was seeing photos. And I was like, this doesn't make sense because I'd had other cats in between Phoebe and Puss. Um, and I kept doing it throughout her stay with me, kept calling her Fibs, Phoebes, etc. And then when it came up to quite close to her passing, again, me calling her Phoebe escalated big time. But it was also one of the things that I could actually tell her, that we've got to both be brave now and let go. But you are part of my soul tribe. You were my previous cat, Phoebe. So I know that we will be back together. So we have to hold on to that. And like I said to you before, we started recording, just to seal the deal. My brother, who is not into this at all, he'd known Phoebe. He was the one that hand reared Phoebe, and he'd obviously known Puss. And he actually called her Phoebe to my mum. It was my mum that said, yeah, he called her Phoebe. And I was like, well, there we go. Like, if that is not validation, because he would have known, obviously, Phoebe's soul very well. So I do believe that they do come into our lives for a reason. I do feel that certainly a lot of them will be part of our soul tribe, especially if they're coming back in and they're coming back in. There's other things that need to heal. And so they're joining us on that journey. I know that Pess has already said to me that she's going to be back in. She said that to somebody, as they say, the day after she passed, and she's shown it to me as well. So I know that she will be back with me. And I feel, from what I've been told, that actually I will have healed quite a lot of what's going on within me, and she's also going to mirror that because of what they've already told me. So that was quite interesting. And I certainly saw that with Phoebe, that she mirrored some of what was my traumas and my wounds. Puss did the same thing, but it was to a lesser degree because I'd done more healing. So the next time she comes in, I'll have done even more healing. So I do think that they do come in, but I do agree with you that sometimes actually our pets do send us other pets, other souls as well to be with us. And quite often I've heard that from people as well, definitely.
Victoria, how can people reach you?
So the main way is if they go to my website, which is www.ametrine, AMETRINE, holistics.co.uk. And you can either then pop me an email, my mobile number's on there, an email address. I'm on Facebook as Ametrine Holistics Limited. Instagram, it's at Victoria PPT, as in people and pet therapist. I'm on LinkedIn. So lots of different ways people can get hold of me. But yeah, if they want a base way, website is a really good one because it kind of just shows obviously everything that I do, not just what we've been talking about tonight. So yeah,
Thank you so much for joining us and for letting people know that our pets are more than just pets, and they're
yeah,
with us for a long time, longer than we realize, which is
yeah.
a good thing if we recognize it. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'm Cassandra. I will see you next time.